Hello, everyone. Welcome to this conversation with my former student, Sarah Rudge. Have I pronounced that correctly,
You
Sarah?
have,
Okay,
yeah.
good. So we're here today because we really want to chat about Sarah's experience, her personal experience with menstrual cycle awareness, and also her professional experience as a life coach supporting women. And Sarah is a graduate of the Menstrual Coach Academy. And yeah, we're going to chat all about that. Sarah, you also used to be a practice nurse, isn't that right?
I did, yes.
Okay, and you're
Yeah,
also a mom of four.
I am. Yeah.
Okay,
Four
okay.
boys.
So four boys. Okay,
Mhm.
so you're very welcome, Sarah, and I'm so excited to have you here. I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the listeners and why we are here together today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lisa. It's really lovely to be chatting with you today. So I am a mindset, menstrual cycle, and wellbeing coach for women, particularly for busy mums, who might be feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, and more specifically going through particular big life changes. So things like when they do become a mum, so matrescence, perhaps when their children go to school or they're going back to work. So those kind of big transitions that happen, um, and aren't talked about enough, I don't think, and are kind of
Mm.
minimized um, and we're kind of expected just to get on and change or not change and be who we were before and bounce back, and how it's just kind of brushed over. So I'm really passionate about helping busy mums to work through those changes, um, but looking through the lens of all of them, all the different parts of them, being really holistic. And I think because we are, as humans, we are complicated and interconnected, so it's really important that my approach is holistic and works with all the different parts of the women that I work with. And the aim is to for them to build more of themselves in their routines and build resilience and more connection and presence, so that they can find more of themselves in the day to day, but have more ease and flow in the inevitable chaos.
I love that, Sarah. That's such big work and really important work. Because yeah, like the reality is we have so much going on around us and
Mm.
moms especially. So would you tell us maybe how you got into that work and yeah, what brought you there?
Yeah, sure. I myself had some coaching nearly 6 years ago. I felt completely overwhelmed at the time. I felt really lost, and very stuck. And I had kind of lost myself in people pleasing and perfectionism. And my inner dialogue was really critical.
Mm.
Um, and I just kind of got to the point where I had had enough. I knew that I had to make changes. Um, so I reached out to a coach that I saw on Instagram, um, and started to work with her. And I realized it was things that I was struggling with for a long time, even before having children. And having children was the one thing that I really dreamed of doing and was really sure that I would love to be able to do. But it was the one thing that kind of floored me in a way at the same
Mm.
time, bringing up this. It was very much a mirror to stuff that I was struggling with before. Um, so yeah, I started work with the coach and worked through how I'd obviously built up these coping mechanisms as I was growing up. Um, and rather than them just being who I was, they were yeah, mechanisms that I could work through and change for myself. And I began to really slowly connect to who I was.
Mm.
um and it was kind of really small steps, like journaling in the evenings and just taking a bit more time for myself, um and just getting to know myself where I was at that point. And it was, yeah, and it's still an ongoing process now, but it was hugely life changing and put me on this path where, um, I want to help other mums and women in similar situations. And it wasn't until about 3 years ago that I actually made the leap to become a coach myself. Um, and absolutely love doing that. And it was really important to me that I I made sure that I was kind of holistic. And I think maybe that's the nurse in me. So I used to be a practice nurse before that, and did a few other jobs too. I was a school nurse for a little while and a district nurse to start with. And absolutely loved connecting with people and helping them. And I think it just got to a point where I couldn't give as much as I wanted to. Um, so, and it was, and in terms of balancing it after having children, I had two boys at the time, and I just couldn't do both.
Mm.
And and I know that some women can and love having the different roles in their lives. But for me, it was too much. So yeah, I stopped working as a nurse, which wasn't an easy choice financially, but it was the right thing for us as a family. Um, yeah, and I think sort of being a stay-at-home mum was amazing and the most difficult thing ever at the same time. Um, and I think I just kind of lost myself more in that. Um,
Mm.
but I think it needed to happen. It needed to happen. It was kind of inevitable that it was going to happen. And yeah, so I feel really passionately that I want to help other women through challenges that might be facing through coaching, um and I wanted to make sure that it was an approach that kind of worked with different parts of us. So I've done a neuroscience for coaches course, so that I can help to bring some of the science of habit formation and goals and that kind of thing. And I did a somatic coaching course, so I can bring some somatic exercises so that we do kind of tap into the wisdom of our bodies. Because I've very much been somebody who lives in my head, and for a long time, a massive overthinker. And I think I would never have even thought of tapping into my body for, in terms of wisdom that it holds, and the information that it can kind of give me. Um, and then I saw your podcast and was listening to that, and something just kind of clicked in me that it was this final jigsaw piece that was missing, um, because I was struggling with PMDD, um, alongside kind of getting on with being a busy mum. It was something that had kind of come to the forefront a bit, sort of about 4 years ago. Um, so when I found your podcast and the wisdom that brought me, it was hugely helpful.
Mm.
Um, and then when I realized that you offered a course, I had this really visceral reaction in my body that was something that I was meant to be doing
Mm.
to help support myself and to bring that work into my coaching as well.
Mm. I love that, Sarah. I love the story, and you've taken us on the journey there a little bit. And I can really relate to that feeling of the visceral feeling of, oh, this is the next piece of the puzzle
Mm,
for me to do. Excuse me. Um, so with regards to the, because you wanted to chat about the course then and PMDD, and you know, that must not have been easy for you as a mom of four to be navigating PMDD every month. Would you maybe give us a little insight into
mm.
what your experience of that was like?
Yeah, sure. It wasn't easy. It felt, um, for 2 weeks of the final 2 weeks of the month, the through my luteal phase, I felt like a different person. I felt like I was two different people. Um, and I wanted to retreat and um, and hide away, but obviously that wasn't possible. So I had to work really hard to give myself capacity to make sure that I was patient for my boys, and was able to function well enough for them. And I think that then led to the biggest challenge was then that I kind of didn't leave very much for my husband. So he kind of got the brunt of it. I would very much kind of shut off, and he really felt that. So that was really difficult. Um, and I was trying to work against it. I was trying um, to ignore it sometimes and squash it down and try and sort of minimize it as much as I could. But it was very difficult to minimize because it was really powerful, and I wanted to kind of disassociate from it, disconnect from it, I guess, and just say to myself, well, it's not me, it's not who I am. Um, and yeah, it was really difficult. And just before COVID, actually, I'd gone to the GP about it, and she had offered for me to go on a pill, to go on the progesterone only pill to see if that would help. And then COVID hit, and my husband was actually a key worker, and I just didn't want to try something new whilst I was at home by myself. So it was about probably 18 months later that I went back to the GP.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just, and I knew then I'd done some research about different, I don't think it's NICE guidelines. I think it's something similar, but about what GPs can offer. And I really didn't want to add more hormones to the situation. I just didn't think that was the right thing. Um, and I'd been part of a PMDD support group, and they had been really informative and helpful. So I kind of went knowing that I wanted to try something in particular, which was medication for just the luteal phase. So an antidepressant for just the 2 weeks of my luteal phase. And and she was really open to that. She could see that I'd done my research and that I had gone in kind of um, making an informed choice, and she was happy to give that a try. Um, and so that's what I did, and it really did help. It really took the edge off, um, and yeah, it helped the kind of it not be quite so harsh in the contrast between my luteal phase and the other 2 weeks of my
Mm.
cycle. Um, because for me, it was literally I have ovulation pain, so I know that I was ovulating, and then literally the next day I would start to feel like I was dipping into this space, and it was, yeah, a big chunk of time every month. So having this medication really helped, and um, and I knew it was I was in a better place for it. And then when I found your course, I it something inside me, I just knew that it was what I needed to do to really support myself even further. And so by doing the course, I was fundamentally doing it for me, and it was so it was so powerful because I began to be able to sort of honor all of the parts of me rather than dreading the last 2 weeks and seeing it as a something I wanted to switch off from and wished it didn't take place. I kind of started to appreciate that it was a big part of me. It was part of me. It wasn't a different person. It was me, and there's wisdom there to find, and there are ways that I can help myself so that it was a space that I was happiest and more comfortable to be in.
Mm.
Um, and so over the course and that time, it was something that actually began to enjoy and look forward to, which I never ever thought I would would be possible for me to look forward to that second phase of my cycle. I think because I had small ways that were different to look after myself. So I would look forward to those small ways, those kind of small rituals of giving myself space and time to journal in a certain way, to welcome in my inner critic rather than try and shut it down. And it was just really freeing to be able to accept all the parts of me rather than fight against them, ignore them. Yeah, it was amazing. And I think also being in that collective space with all of the other women, it was so powerful and co-regulating. And so it kind of, there's almost this kind of permission that was there to be all of the parts of us. And yeah, and that's something I've never experienced before. Being in a space like that you created was really special.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for being part of it, Sarah, and sharing your experience of the course. Because it's funny because now that's a year ago now that
Yeah.
you joined. So part of me is like, oh, I don't even remember what I said or what was said in the group, you know. But you're right, everyone has their own journey, and I love that you were there for yourself, you know, and I think a lot of people are actually there for themselves, or at least when we go into that space, we're there to learn, but we also have our own embodied journey with the
Mm.
material. It's hard to do the work if we don't have our own relationship with it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so okay, so where are you now then with your journey and PMDD now that that's a year later?
Yeah. So having been in a really good space for um yeah, almost a year, I would say. Um, my cycles have started to change a bit in terms of length and more recently that kind of um this darkness that hadn't been there for a fair while after having medication and then doing my menstrual cycle awareness work. I've kind of had pockets of those PMDD challenges recently, but not in my luteal phase necessarily. So I feel like it's kind of um, those challenges have been cropping up throughout my cycle. So I feel a little bit less anchored in that way. And I've had some other symptoms like brain fog and that's been quite challenging at times and really struggling with a train of thought or a particular word that I'm thinking of. Um, I've had quite a lot of joint pain, so
Mm,
particularly my knees and my wrists too. Um, and I've had a bit of some digestive issues as well. Um, I've had some night sweats um, and some difficulty sleeping at night, which is new for me. So I went to the GP. I'd also tried to give blood as a side note. I tried to give blood and it was told my iron was too low and I couldn't give blood again for a year, which has never happened before.
wow, okay.
Yeah, so I went to the GP predominantly to get some bloods, but also to talk about this picture of symptoms that had been coming up. And um, so we had some bloods taken and they all came back absolutely fine.
Mhm.
My iron was absolutely fine. And so she kind of agreed that it looked like the picture of perimenopause, which is what I'd suspected because my periods have been irregular, newly irregular for the last kind of 6 months or so, maybe a bit more. Um, and and I kind of half expected a bit of a fight. And I think I'd heard lots of stories from other women that you kind of to expect it to not be a smooth process of being listened to and being heard and even being
Yeah.
believed as
Yeah.
well. Um and I think having done the work and the course, I kind of felt even more empowered um to go knowing that what I wanted to say, and making sure that I'd look to see who the best GP was in terms of their special interests in women's health and stuff. So I'd done that, and she was really good, and she listened to me, and kind of asked me where I wanted to go from there. So I am thinking about HRT possibly, but I'm kind of wanting just to get a bit more understanding um of where I am. And something that, just going back to the GP appointment, that really came up for me when she did say to me, it does look like it's perimenopause from what you're saying to me, and I'm happy to talk about HRT with you. I got this really strong feeling of like panic, like, oh my gosh, like self-doubt. Am I, what if what I've said to her, is it true?
Mm.
And really kind of doubting my own experience, just really briefly. But it was really interesting that I I kind of went through that self-doubt. And I think, and then I sort of think to myself, it's really understandable given that as we grow up, as girls and women, um we are kind of often not listened to and believed in our experiences through the medical system. And so, yeah, for it to be this kind of possible diagnosis that is just purely on my word, it's not a diagnosis that is done through blood tests and stuff. It kind of, it brought the self-doubt
Yeah.
up for a second. But yeah, that didn't last very long, and I know my own body, and this is what I'm experiencing. But yeah, I think it's important that we remind ourselves that we do know our own bodies best, um, and kind of hopefully come from that place of empowerment, I think.
Yeah. It's so
Um,
good that you were able to catch that as well. So
yeah,
you're aware of
yeah,
that, you know?
yeah. It was interesting, and at the time, um, but what, and I was some times where I just kind of felt like this is really annoying that I
Mm.
had got to this really positive place with my PMDD, and um and I felt really kind of settled and at peace, and I wasn't really tracking massively before that, because I just felt in a really good place in terms of knowing what day I was on, what I need, and tuning into my body in the moment. And so when that started to change, it was really frustrating.
Yeah.
Um,
But those tools and skills that you learned and embodied, I guess they're the same tools that we'll need during our perimenopause
yeah,
journey too, right?
completely.
Yeah, and tracking
Yeah,
as well. Like I was just speaking to another group last week about it. And if we have a relationship with menstrual cycle awareness and tracking our cycle before we hit perimenopause, um, you've got credit in the bank there. Like it's good.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think that was the next part of kind of my internal conversation, was that, but I do have this foundation of being able to tune into my body, and that is still my anchor. It might not be an overarching monthly cycle of an anchor, but it's a daily anchor that's there. And having those skills to feel like I'm able to do that safely, to tune into my body safely, and to think about what I'm needing, where my energy levels are, and meet myself where I am, and that at that point.
Mhm.
So I think um, it just means that you have to ensure that you are more in the moment, and you
Mhm.
are more present with yourself each day, and that can't be a bad thing. Um it's good. It's I like, there are positives to that. You are more present in yourself, and what you're needing. And yes, you might not be able to plan ahead in the same way that you might try to when you kind of have a more regular cycle. Um, but I think you can get to a point where you are much better at putting boundaries in place, knowing what your needs are, um, and having that sort of self-trust as well,
Mm-hmm.
which is really important. So you might not necessarily have the same self-understanding at times, because there are changes that are happening. You can still anchor yourself with that self-trust.
And that's huge, Sarah, isn't it? Because that's, I guess the thing I see the most, and you probably see the most in your practice as well, in your work, is the self-doubt and the
Yeah.
questioning of the self, and like personally, that took me years to work through, and it still
Mm.
creeps up a lot.
Mm.
But when you are able to access self-trust, or even remind yourself that you've done it before, and that you
Yeah.
access it again, is a huge relief and a gift to have that in ourselves. Are you feeling like that the menstrual cycle work you've done to date and all the coaching you've done and the inner work has helped you to feel self-trust, even though you're in this like you're in the jungle, if you will, because perimenopause is very different for every woman.
Mm.
Everyone's experience is so different.
Mm.
There's no map.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, like we do need the support and the resources, and there's lots of great books and loads of content out there to help us. But yeah, ultimately you have to be your own guide.
Mm.
So do you feel like you're in that place where you're kind of figuring that out?
Yeah, yeah. And I think, yeah, self-trust is a huge part of that. And I think having a relationship with yourself um where you can tune into yourself and tune into what's going on for you. It's so important.
Mm,
And I don't know, I think I trust myself that I'm going to make the best out of the situation as well. So it's
yeah.
not going to be I think sometimes it can be seen as the kind of menopause can be seen as, and it is for lots, can be for some women, it can be very difficult, challenging process, and not be all kind of positive and
Mm-hmm.
um but I think I can trust myself that I'm going to best support myself in the ways that I can, and having that foundation of menstrual cycle awareness and how and sort of small rituals that I can do to meet my needs, and have boundaries there,
Yeah.
and feel empowered enough to go and seek help when I need to,
Yeah.
or um to read around different symptoms and kind of get that information for myself. I think that feels really important too.
Yeah, because I think as well another thing that just popped into my head there is one of the things, and we discuss this a lot in our program, is fear. Like
Mm.
we live in a world where the picture of menopause is painted as this like terrible thing that happens to people, and there's loads of suffering. And yes, women do need support, but it can really, even for young girls, it can put
Mm.
fear into our brains that menopause is equals suffering, and darkness for everyone. Um, and that can be, yeah, that's not nice because if we're in fear with that, we're not supported, we're not empowered, you know.
Mm.
Um, so that's something to keep an eye on is like, are we in fear of this?
Yeah,
What do we do when we are in fear? Where do we go in ourselves? Mm.
yeah, that is so true. And I think um generally as women that can be something as of a default,
Hmm.
because we're not, our bodies aren't always um that we're not necessarily listened to and believed in our experiences through the medical system particularly. And so it's understandable, isn't it? It's so understandable that lots of women might feel that they're um other medical people have power over them rather
Yeah,
than that they know their bodies best, and
exactly. Yeah.
to advocate for themselves. And yeah, and I think having that lens of awareness of kind of how we grow up and in society, um is so important that
Mm.
we appreciate that the challenge of that and where we can be coming from. Um, yeah, and I think that's something I'm also really aware of as a coach, that um, I want to make sure that that balance is there, that my the women that I work with know that they are an expert in themselves and they
Mm.
know themselves best. And yes, I can, as a coach and a facilitator, I can offer pockets of information and knowledge to them, but that's for them to choose whether they take on or not, and then for them to hopefully feel empowered by it rather than me talking at them and giving information that I feel that they need,
Yeah,
if that
you're
makes
drawing it
sense.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's really important, that I think
Oh,
power is something, especially from having done your course, it's something I'm really, really aware of on the in the day to day.
we talk about power a lot in the podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah, we do.
yeah.
'Cause it's so like easy to just dump information on people, but actually they're needing help being guided through a process, you know?
Mm.
But I would love to learn more about your coaching practice, Sarah. So you are working, as you said earlier, with women going through transitions. I'm curious, what are the kinds of things you see in your clients? What kind of topics, themes, commonalities are coming up for you in your practice?
Yeah, so it obviously varies quite a lot, but I do notice that there is a theme of change, in that for some women it might be that a child um, is going to school, and they feel kind of, I think it's about anchors and identities, and um, for another lady, a child was going to university, and I think at these points it kind of can give space for reflection about where they are, where they've been in their journey, and then where they want to go. Um, it can be sometimes that they are going back to work after maternity leave, and
Mhm.
they just feel completely lost in this new identity, who they are, but going back to a space where um, they're a different person now, but they'll be expected to show up in the same way probably, um and give in the same way, and it's just, and things have changed so much for them, and even the practical sides of their routines, um and making sure that their routines feel um kind of have ease and lightness in them, and they don't
Mhm.
feel massively overwhelming, and that they have nothing of themselves in those routines. And um because I think it's really easy to get sort of thrown into things where life is so busy that before you know it, a year's gone by, and like you just you you feel lost and
Mhm.
overwhelmed by things,
Mhm.
and frustrations can build. Um, yeah, so that's definitely something that I've noticed. And sometimes it can be that there's just a general feeling of feeling stuck and having no idea, and it could be that they've just realized that they need to do something about it, I guess, in a similar way to me. um and yeah, and I think it's just giving space initially for them to make sense of where they've been and what they've achieved is really, really important. um and that can be powerful in itself.
Yeah, because naturally, I suppose, if we're busy and busy moms and working, etc., it's not in our diary to just kind of check in and like look at those achievements, right? So,
Mm.
because I even myself, like I know that I have to really remind myself to do that, because my brain will just default to what needs to get done in the house or
Yeah,
what
or
needs to
just
get
that
done.
negative bias that we
Yeah,
have, what that just sees everything that we haven't done, and she,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Because like I think everyone struggles with transition, you know, like it's really, really hard. But it's so good to know though that nowadays you can work with someone like yourself when your children or your teenager are going off to university or going to school or yeah, going back to work after maternity leave. That's a huge transition for a lot of women, and some women are out of work for years, you know. So
Mm,
like, and look at the world, like the rate of technology is changing and roles change and businesses change. So to step back into that isn't easy.
mm.
Um, so when your clients work with you, and when they're finished maybe, or that they've gone through the first process with you, where do you hope for them to get to in themselves?
Yeah, yeah, and it varies depending on who I'm working with, but I really hope for them to have found more of themselves
Mm,
in their days. Um, and the foundation of that comes from the course. Your course
mm,
is polyvagal theory and
mm,
understanding their nervous systems. Um, so I really hope for them to have that foundation, that they are used to tuning into where they are in their bodies and what they need in that moment, and how they can bring themselves compassion. So um, having that awareness so they can live by tuning in to their nervous systems and hopefully their menstrual cycles as well, so that they can um, build routines that really work for them and are sustainable for them and meet their needs. And I think when you're building routines from a place of knowing your nervous system and your menstrual cycle, that is much more likely to happen. Um, and you're much more likely to have presence in the day and
mm,
connect with yourself and those around you. Um, and I really want for them to feel um, compassion for themselves as a default.
mm,
So obviously, then inner critic is probably going to be there at some points, but just to have a better relationship with their inner critic.
mm,
So um, they know when they want to welcome them in and learn from them, um, but their kind of default is kindness to themselves. Um, and their expectations of themselves are realistic. And I think that one is really key as well, because I think as women particularly, we can feel pressures to achieve so much for everybody else as a
mm,
default.
mhm,
Um, and are much more likely to be perfectionists in our approach. And I think when the women I work with can let go of that
mm,
um, and have that self trust that they can tune into what they feel is important and not do everything at the best of their ability, but actually they can really appreciate that their good enough is good enough. Um, and so just taking the pressure off themselves, um, I think that's really important too. Um, and being resilient in the challenges that inevitably come up um, in the busy world that we live in. I think that's really important as well. So, yeah, I'm hoping that they go away knowing themselves so much better, knowing um, have built in a relationship with their intuition so that they can make decisions from a place of self trust, as we were talking about before, um, and ease as well, so that I know in the past for me decisions have been quite tricky. But having a relationship with my intuition is just so important and really helps, and it is connected to trusting yourself. Um, and just that they can feel that they are doing their best, and um, that it doesn't have to be this high standard across the board, because that's not realistic.
no.
Um, that you can't be all things for all parts of and roles that you have in your life. So, um, yeah, that they know themselves really well, that they have ease and lightness in the chaos of the day, and connection, um, and are looking after themselves through their needs and through their nervous system and their menstrual cycles.
I love that, Sarah. It sounds so intentional, the work you're doing with people and so important. It's just such important work because yeah, so many of us are spread very thin. I think women and
Mm.
mothers, parents are spread very thin, and that's very hard. I see it as well in my own coaching practice is that, and it's very hard. And I have a kind of a bit of a curveball question on top of that, which is that, and maybe even for yourself, because it sounds like you're really helping people to thrive rather than be running on empty,
Yeah.
and I know that feeling too, feeling that feeling of like, oh, I feel like I'm thriving during this time in my life, and I know how to look
Mm.
after myself, and I'm connected to my own life force energy, and I'm not giving it all
Mm.
to my inner critic or perfectionism or the negativity bias, and that's like
Yeah.
that is a lot of work to work through all of that stuff. How do you balance even for yourself and also with your clients, balance the self-care, like those all those deeper layers of self-care that you're talking about and the identity with someone who is ambitious and is wanting to achieve things, or like yourself, you're a mom but also building a business and a practice. And I'm sure you're working with women who have other ambitions and things like that. So I'm curious about
Mm.
that too.
Yeah, I think it's it's how perhaps things are framed.
Mm.
I'm just thinking about one particular client that and that how do I work this? Um, she recognizes herself to be ambitious and a workaholic. Um, but I think it's about giving permissions to ourselves that we can see things as rest, as
Mm.
productive and necessary. Um, and I think that comes with a bigger understanding of the systems within us, so our nervous system and our menstrual cycle, um, and when we can get to know those, we have the knowledge and and the understanding and the permission that we need perhaps sometimes to find, particularly as women, that we do need to rest,
Hmm.
um, and that does benefit our how productive we can be at different points in our cycles.
Mm.
So when we can focus on particular times as being especially helpful in being productive, like around ovulation, um, and if we can sort of work with those peaks of energy and focus, um, I think then that can naturally just allow ourselves to be more welcoming to the times when we are needing to rest more. Um, and I think living in a patriarchy, in a capitalist patriarchy that we do, it is expected that we do show up in the same way and produce the same amount in every single day, and that as women is just fairly impossible to do in a way that is um, sustainable and feel true to us, I guess,
Mhm.
at a really core level. Um, so I think having that general awareness of how we work in our bodies is really important, so
Mm.
that if you are particularly ambitious, um, that you really give the space when that's going to work best
Mhm.
in your cycles. Um, and I think perhaps again it goes back to expectations, and sometimes you have to start really small and have small moments of yourself throughout the day when you have got so much going on. If having a particular big project that you've got on that you need to focus on, um, that it might be going back to basics of just sitting and having 10 minutes of peace in the morning, um, is enough for you at that stage. So I think it's also to do with checking in with your short-term goals and
Mm.
linking that with your cycles within you, so that you can ensure that you are having more of yourself in the day and you are resting. but you're also honoring that those drives of purpose and ambition and um yeah, and kind of meeting yourself where your goals are at
Mm.
that point.
I love that because I suppose when you do that somatic work that you are teaching people, and I know this for myself, like it becomes a non-negotiable then, doesn't it? It becomes
Mm.
just part of who you are, or if you're, it's like meditation or something, or journaling or prayer. If it becomes part of your day, then you can feel off when you don't have it, and it's
Mm.
integrated into your way of being and your needs as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so yeah, I think it's a really good reflection on working with people who are ambitious because that's the thing that I see as well in my own coaching practice and in myself is that sometimes the drive uh or the stress doesn't come necessarily from pressure or perfectionism, but well, maybe sometimes perfectionism, but also from like just loving what you do and
yeah,
ambition and enjoying it, but actually forgetting that, yeah, because it is good to just go for that walk or get to bed early or rest more in different ways, and that's really important. And that's where the nervous system work comes in because you're able to track yourself when you feel those cues of tiredness sooner.
yeah,
So
yeah. And
powerful.
it's
Mm.
something I definitely relate to at the moment. And I can really have a hyper focus on my coaching business and really want to just to plow on and
Mm.
get so much done. Um and that's amazing. And I want to make the most of that as kind of motivation, that energy. But there is a line that you kind of have to then stop and just think and tune into what is going on for you and then think about the bigger picture as well so that you um are being kind to yourself in knowing that why this is happening, but also being realistic in that these other things need to get done as well, and also that you want overall you need to be looking after yourself in terms of your nervous system um and yeah, and you kind of have to trust that you will go back to that place because it is such a passion and an ambition that it will still be there for you once
Mm.
you've done the things that
Exactly,
you
and
need
that's
to
the
do.
thing. Yeah, it's not like if you rest, because sometimes that's the problem is we think if we rest, then we'll be missing out or we're letting something go. But actually, I find that when I step into rest more, I get ideas or I get clarity or I can like because actually where was I? I think I was on a meditation class last week and the lady said because we were actually doing the class in a gym and they had like converted the gym into like a mindfulness space in the evening. It was really lovely.
Oh, nice.
And the lady said, yeah, like our brain is a muscle too. And I was like, oh yeah, like it, it you can't exercise, you can't lift weights every single day of the week. You have to have recovery. And the science now is really pointing towards that. And it's the same thing with our brain. Like you can't always be on all the time.
Mm,
Head needs to take a moment to rest. And I like when you were talking about overthinking, I was like, I can really relate to that. I can even now, like I still get into these cycles of overthinking if there's a problem, but actually sometimes thinking my way through the issue isn't actually the solution. I just have to rest and I don't know, put on a movie or cook
yeah,
a nice meal or get out or go for a walk or have a cup of tea with a friend or something. Um, just give ourselves a bit of a break. But that can
yeah.
be hard to do when you have years and years in your history of like doing all the time. It's very hard to change those habits, which is why coaching is so helpful.
It is, yeah, and it is about really starting small and then building up on that. Um, but you just made me think of the other end of starting small when you are able to take more time for yourself. I joined a choir about
Oh, lovely, Sarah.
ago, and
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. And occasionally, if I've got, like we were talking about, I've been working in my coaching business, and there's something that's really exciting that I'm producing. I
Mm.
have caught myself thinking, oh, I could just stay at home and carry on.
Yeah.
Rob can do the bedtime like he's going to, but I can stay at home and just get this bit done. And then I know that I'm going to get so much from going out and singing in this choir,
Yeah.
and and it's amazing, and it's so nice to completely switch off my brain and not think about anything, because you're just there focusing, and you're co-regulating with all these other people around you and making this amazing sound, and it's really special. And yeah, I'm really grateful that I am able to have that chunk of time that is just for me. And the boys see that I'm taking time for me. And even though they can sometimes pull at the heartstrings and say, we want you to be here for bedtime. And
Oh.
but I know that it's okay for them to Rob is more than capable of doing bedtime, and he does it a lot. So um yeah, so just kind of, if any guilt comes up, just knowing that I'm doing it to look after myself, but
Yeah.
ultimately looking after myself does help me look after them if I need to have that layer of
Yeah.
standing on it.
That's
Yeah,
so
it's
lovely, Sarah. I love
gorgeous.
that. And I find that too. Sometimes it's easier to, if you are someone who's a bit like that, like me, because I will also work for myself, and there's no one here telling me what I should do with my schedule,
Yeah.
it has to come from me. Um, the having things in your diary that are external where other people are waiting for you is really
Yeah.
helpful, like I have gym classes that I sign up to in advance, I've paid for in advance. A running group I go to, that's also people, they'll text me just to see if I'm coming, and I feel a little bit of
Okay.
an obligation to go,
Yeah.
like, so the choir is lovely because I'm sure like you've put your name down on that list, for you to go. So if you miss it, there has to be a good reason, I
Yeah,
can
it
imagine.
is helpful, and I think as humans, it's really important to kind of acknowledge that, isn't it? That we do sometimes need to have that extra layer of motivation or responsibility, I guess, that we are
Yeah.
um, in this collective together, that we need to honor our role in that and go. And it's nice, yeah, and it's completely normal and okay that we need that sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
Mm.
Have you got any Christmas concerts coming up with the choir?
Do you know what? It's funny you should say that. Yes, it started as being, we're going to do a concert for our loved ones, and then the next week, the guy who was brilliant, he announced that we've been asked to go and sing at the Christmas lights switch on in town,
Oh,
which is amazing. It's a really special night.
yeah.
But it's actually one that my boys have sung in choirs before, so they're going to be watching me in my choir this
Oh,
time. So it's
no,
quite a
no.
nice, yeah, yeah.
Oh.
It's
And
really
is it
nice.
all men and women in the choir?
Yeah, more women than men, but
Okay.
yes, there is
Yeah.
a mixture.
It's,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
lovely.
I'm a tenor, so I'm a bit of a
Oh, are
lower
you?
voice. Yeah.
Oh, fab. Yeah. It's funny, actually, a lot of people in my communities, in my work, there's been a handful of people who are in choirs who have spoken to me about singing
Okay.
as a way of as a way of tapping into that vagus nerve that we talk about in
Mm.
polyvagal, the using the voice. And I suppose, like if you think about ancient meditation practices, and chanting and all that kind of thing,
Yeah,
makes sense, so
it
what a
does, doesn't
lovely
it?
activity to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Mm.
lovely, and it's on a Wednesday, so it's a really nice kind of midpoint of the week where it's for me. I know
Yeah.
it's there. So yeah, I'm really grateful for it. It's really lovely, and it's just, yeah, it was meant to be. It's just down the road. Um, it's really really nice to have that time for me every week.
Yeah. And you're connecting with others as well, I'm sure.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
So lovely, Sarah. So tell us, where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram. I am Sarah the Reconnection Coach with underscores in between each word. I have a website which is sarahthereconnectioncoach.co.uk, and also on Facebook. Um, yeah, and I actually am going to be setting up a podcast with a friend.
Oh,
Yes, in
exciting.
the next few months. We're hoping to produce the first pilot episode in January, so that's exciting. Talking about all things being female, being a woman.
Amazing. Love
It
it.
is really exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you have a
yeah.
name? Can I ask?
I think so. I think it's okay for me to say we're going to be called Waves of Womanhood.
Oh, gorgeous. I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really exciting. But if anybody wants to just connect and say hi, I'd love to hear from anybody.
Great. I will make sure to pop all that in the notes down below the video,
Okay.
wherever you see this video. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Sarah, to the listeners?
Um, I just wanted to acknowledge actually, Lisa, that your course was it was just so eye-opening for me in lots of different ways, but how you held the space and how you welcomed us um, by just saying just to come as you are and honor where we were and what our needs were, whether we needed to have our video off. It was just the most grown up way of approaching a course, and it gave so many permissions for us, I think, that we needed, and allowed us to really tune into what our needs were. It was a great lesson for me anyway, and it really kind of added to how to look after myself, and how you held the space was it was really special, and I look back on it very fondly, and I do miss it. But I'm yeah very grateful to have been part of it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for saying that, Sarah. That means a lot to me. And yeah, I'm very grateful for that because it's been, I guess, as you know, like years studying this
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
and being taught by wonderful teachers myself and learning from my mistakes and all of that stuff. Listening to women, I would say, if anyone is listening to this from a point of view of wanting to join or learning about coaching themselves, I think my number one value is listen to women because the reason they sign up for these things is because they haven't been listened to
yeah.
and or they're struggling because they haven't been listened to or they haven't gotten the help they needed. And so when we listen, um, we get a lot, they tell you
Mm.
what they need. So
Mm.
yeah, so thank you for saying that. And I'm so glad that you're now integrating that work into your coaching practice. And that's another really exciting thing is that you like one doesn't have to become a menstrual cycle coach, but you can have a more general practice and have niched services and work with
Mm.
very specific areas like you are doing with your clients.
Mm.
Mm. And then
Yeah,
bringing it in depending on what your clients are needing or what they're ready for as well is something
yeah,
important.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it isn't something that they necessarily would be on their radar to need, but
Yeah.
it can bring so much information and understanding of themselves. So yeah, it's really important work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Sarah. So
Yeah,
fun to
thank
chat
you
with
so much.
you. We'll have to
Yeah.
have you back in again when talking about self-employment and working from
Yeah.
home because
Yeah,
that's
I'd
a whole
love
other
that.
topic.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much for having me,
Oh,
Lisa.
you're
It's
so
lovely
welcome.
to
And I'll
see you.
make sure to pop all your links in the show notes. Thank you everyone for listening. Take care.